And he and I put together a weed management plan for the farm, which is fairly expensive. And he asked me, he said, so how much is all this going to cost me? And I said, the better way to look at this is how much the weeds problems that you've got are costing you right now. Because one of the biggest things that you look at is how much fertility they're robbing from you. And if you've got an appreciable stand of something, or even worse, if you've got a bad stand of foxtail out there, it's costing you a lot of money. In a lot of cases, it's probably 50% or more of what the chemical cost is going to be. And you can't stand those kind of losses. See what I got going. I'm going the wrong way.
No, it's not going. Maybe if I don't know. I'll click for you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Well, I'm gonna put this back over here and I'll just tell you when to throw it. A lot of reasons for us to control weeds. And the biggest one is competition. It's robbing not only fertilizer from you, but when we get short on rainfall, it's robbing water from the grass your cows need to eat, or either from that hay pasture that you're fixing to try to grow hay on. We prevent big economic losses. These weeds can also be host for insects and diseases that can be problematic in your stand. And again, I want to re-emphasize competition for nutrients. They tell you at speech school, if you want somebody to understand something, you need to mention it 3 times. And I believe I've mentioned competition for nutrients 3 times, and we ain't got started good yet. So keep that in mind. Flip it, please, ma'am. The reason that we have weed issues is that we have things like pigweed that have a very hard seed coat on them. Now, a pigweed plant also will make anywhere from 200 to 250,000 seeds if you let it go to seed. And those seeds can germinate anywhere from next week to some of them 10 years down the road. And they sit there forever and ever and ever. We've got some of them that have persistent vegetative structures, rhizomes, stolons. These weeds can figure out a way to survive. And we have to pay attention and have good identification to be able to tell what we've got so that we have effective management. Next slide, please, ma'am. So, different life cycles. We need to be able to identify these weeds so we can tell if they're an annual. Now, one of the things that I'm going to talk to y'all about, because most of what I got it off of y'all's want list was dealing with annuals. Annuals can be effectively controlled if you get a pre-emergent herbicide on right at the right time. And the nice thing about using a pre-emerge that I'm going to talk to you about here shortly is that pre-emerge herbicides, when annual weeds are your problem, you can get rid of a bunch of them with one application. So that's something to think about. Perennials that can last typically more than 2 years can be rough for us to get rid of. Some of our clovers are perennials, and I had a first the other day. I had somebody call and want to know how they could get rid of native white echo-type clover because it was killing their Bermuda grass grazing. And it is pretty aggressive, and it will take over in patches, but I convinced him to leave it well enough alone. Then we got biennials out there, and a good example of a biennial weed is, oh Lord, it just went right out of my head. I'm getting old, guys. But curly dock. I should look at my slide and see what I'm supposed to be talking about. But curly dock and thistle are both examples of biennial weeds. And if we can kill them when they're young, it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper typically. Next slide, please, ma'am. So a lot of factors as far as seed germination. The biggest one is water. If we have water in the next one in line temperature, we can germinate a seed. I'm gonna talk to y'all about crabgrass a little while. But crabgrass will germinate somewhere between 50 and 58 degrees of soil temperature. It doesn't bury itself very deep, so it's right there in the thatch layer. And most of our crabgrass in our part of the world germinates the first week of March. And the neat thing about crabgrass is once it germinates, it sits there in that little bunny-eared plant that's very inconspicuous, and it just sits there. And it'll wait until it gets warm enough for it to grow. And I have people every year that miss that window of putting a pre-emerge on to control crabgrass because they wait until it's too late to do it. Next slide, please, ma'am. Talked about seed. Pigweed, 200,000 plus seeds per plant. Now you leave several thousand pigweeds out there. Can you understand now why pigweed for some of you is a never-ending problem? Especially with its ability to go 10 years before a seed will germinate on some of it. Lamb's quarters, 30,000 seed. You can hardly even see them. They're so small. Crabgrass, one little old patch of crabgrass about that big can put out over 50,000 seeds in a year. And again, they're so tiny you can't hardly see them. And one little old bitty henbit plant produces over 200 seeds. And henbit is another one that'll sit out there, and those seeds can stay there for 7, 8, 10 years before they germinate. And they just have a nice survival plan. Some of them will germinate the next year, and some of them will wait a decade. Some of them will wait till you young'uns get out of high school. So 12-month out of a year problem. And we've got to think that way for controlling weeds. Just because you don't see it, that's the time you need to be out there looking for them. Next slide. So we've got two different ways we can approach this. Pre-emergents are applied before our weed seed germinates. They are absolutely no good to us once we have germination. They don't do a darn thing once that seed is germinated and started to grow. You just threw your money out the door if you put it out. So post-emergence are applied after weed emergence comes up. And generally, you're not going to see any control of unemerged weeds with the exception of using 2,4-D. If you can get a good rain about 1/2 inch or so after you put out an application of 2,4-D and you can get it in the thatch layer, it will impede germination on plants. That's a trick you can use when you sprig Bermuda grass to try and control broadleaf weeds in there, but you've got to time it just right on the front edge, get it out there on the sprigged area, and then get some rain or either run irrigation over the top of it if you got it. Next slide. Now, I'm going to talk about pre-emergence. And no, I don't work for Bayer Chemical. And no, I don't get any money from this. But Resilon, over the past 5 years of us working with it, and me working with some sizable producers in both grazing land and hayland, has showed some real promise. Now folks, first thing I hear is, good God, I can't afford this stuff. When you take a look at how you use it, what it controls, and those numbers may look a little softer to you. It's an effective treatment. As far as I'm concerned now, it's the only treatment if you've got foxtail. It is so effective on that, and we'll talk about that when I get to it. Crabgrass, seedling Johnson grass, pigweed, horse nettle. Somebody put pokeweed on the list, and I called Tammy and I said, they must not have very many deer. Because a deer will eat a pokeweed, but he'll walk around a lot of stuff to get to the pokeweed. But yeah, it's an annual. So a pre-emerge works great to control it. How many of you got problems with annual ryegrass in a hay stand? I see some hands coming up out there. This is one of the things that'll help clean that up. Any other annual weed you can think of, it works on. Henbit, chickweed, any of those. But Resilon is a really good place for us to start. And it's going to be the only pre-emerge I talk to y'all about. There are other things out there, but they cost either just as much or almost as much, and they're not nearly as effective. This stuff will stay with you for 9 to 12 months. And that's why it is so practical to use in hayland and grazing land. There's no grazing prohibition for using it. You can put it out there just like you did the old days with Graze On, and you can have cattle out there grazing at the same time. There is a haying prohibition of 40 days, but when we put it on, that's going to be long gone. So, standard rate we look at is 3 to 5 ounces per acre. We cannot exceed over 6 ounces per acre in a year. Typically, we're going to split applications 3 ounces early season, followed by 3 ounces mid to late season, and I'm going to fine tune that for you when we get to it. As I said, there's a haying restriction of 40 days, no grazing restriction, and typically we want to make sure we've got at least 15 gallons per acre of water going out to put this stuff down. 20 ain't going to hurt nothing, and 25 ain't going to kill you. But you've got to have at least 15 gallons to get good dispersal on it. Now, timing, we can apply this stuff late winter or late summer to control weeds, and we're about to talk about that. In general, we're talking about cool season annual weeds, henbit, chickweed, annual ryegrass. It's best to put it out in the fall. I like to see it get on the ground by Labor Day. It's dry. The only thing about it, you got to look at your prospective rainfall at that time of year. So if we're in a real dry spell like we were this past fall, I told everybody to keep it in the barn. But that's a problem with a lot of chemicals. We got to be able to get this stuff in the ground, and if we don't get rainfall, we can't do it. Warm season weeds like foxtail, crabgrass, pigweed, horse nettle, applications mid to late January to early February are appropriate as far as label timing goes. Now I'm about to toss y'all something that we've been playing with, what we've been working with, and found a better, we think a better timing strategy in using Resilon. Next, for our area, for warm season weed control, we often get really wet in January and we can't get in the field. Now this year it wasn't the big problem because our rains got spaced out and we were still dry enough. 2 years ago, January, you couldn't walk out in there without bogging up to your ankles. So when we get one of those wet years, or if you're worried that you won't be able to get this chemical out, and I work very closely with Embry Farm Service on their hayland, and this is a strategy that we've been using for the past 2 years over there, is that we come in November, Thanksgiving to basically the first week of December with 3 ounces of Resilon. Now remember, this stuff has got an extremely long activity window. So if we can get this stuff on in late November, December, we have beat all of these warm season weeds to the punch. And if we have a wet January, and generally we're getting some rainfall during this time, so all you got to do is look at the forecast and say, all right, we're getting a good rain, looks like coming through here next week. Go ahead and get it in the field and get it watered in. Now, if you have a really heavy pressure problem with weeds, and this is especially true with foxtail, I would come back February, early March and put 2 to 3 more ounces out to get your max rate. And that's pretty much gonna put a lid on anything germinating out there. And usually by the end of February, 1st of March, we're either dried down enough that we can get equipment in the field and supplement it. This is the most effective thing, as I said, that I've ever seen working with foxtail. Next slide, please, ma'am. There's one of our test plots. That's on foxtail. 3 ounces applied New Year's Day. Pretty impressive, isn't it? That's foxtail on either side of that strip right there. And we had a breakthrough right here with a little bit of foxtail. And the problem there was a little waterway right there. We got a big rain and I think it just washed the chemical off. Because where it washed over on the other side, you see that little ditch right there? Where it washed that way, there wasn't no foxtail along that little trench. But that's pretty impressive. And the thing about this is it works. If you get it there, I have never seen this stuff fail. So, next slide. Post-emergence. Now I'm gonna, let me go ahead and talk about foxtail here before I get to it. It's on my mind. I'm getting old, and if I don't get it while it's on my mind, it ain't gonna stay there. So, in working foxtail, I worked with 3 different farmers before we had Resilon. We worked 4 years using pasture and Roundup to knock the foxtail back, and we got it down to somewhere between 5 and 10% of the stand. Percentage of the total stand. 4 years worth of application and doing it right, because every time the chemical company was out, the chemical went out, either me or the chemical rep or both of us were there watching it go down. We calibrated the equipment, we made sure we had everything right. 4 years to go from 85% of the stand down to 5 to 10. Started with a new farmer. The year Resilon became available for use, we went into a field that was 95% of the total stand coverage in green and yellow foxtail. Made 1 application. We put out 4 ounces. We did it first week of January, and when we got to June, we were down to less than 1% of a stand, of that total stand in foxtail. And guess what? All the henbit, the chickweed, and all that other stuff that is normally in there was not there the next year. Now we came back in the fall and put down 2.5 ounces, and that pretty much just cleaned everything out. But we put a little test plot off on the side, and we had persistence to where we only made that 1 application in January. The following January, we did an assessment and we found less than 1% henbit and chickweed. Now folks, it works. It's expensive, but when you look at multiple years of control, going out and spraying, and then you come back and you still hadn't got it rooted out, this stuff is very cost effective over time. Yes, ma'am.
So what do you, when you're saying it's expensive, how much is a gallon of it?
A quart of it's $345.
So a quart, but you're talking ounces per acre.
Mm-hmm. And as low as 2.5 ounces is effective.
What about dollars per acre?
About 35.
$35 an acre.
Mm-hmm. It's not, when you look at what you're saving in multiple applications, it becomes very attractive.
Well, if you spend 4 years worth of waste versus 1 year of paying for something that actually works, that's a no-brainer.
And I tell you what we did with Embry, if y'all ride over there and look at his pastures now, you might go across 40 acres and find enough hen bit to make you a boutonniere out of, literally. And the annual rye is gone. We got perennial rye in there that we're going to have to work on, but the annual rye is gone. All those cool season weeds are gone, and then his hen bit, or excuse me, his foxtail is less than 1% of the stand. Now, I'm going to throw something at y'all. Spray your ditches. I ride around everywhere I go during the growing season, and I see foxtail growing in the roadside ditches, and it's all the way to Chattanooga, Tennessee. So, we kept getting reinfestations on some of these farms. And I told the guys, I said, when you go down the roadside ditch, swing a boom out over the ditch and spray the ditch. And they started doing that, and guess what? The reinfestations stopped. Even spraying the middles, grass middles in your roads. When you put it out, put it down, and you'll stop that reinfestation. It's the best thing I've seen working for it. Now, if you don't want to do, or you get out here and the weather gets you to a point where you can't put it down, let's say it's dry from August through January, and then all of a sudden we get 40 inches of rain, and it puts you out of the pre-emerge business, or you just don't want to do the pre-emerge because you don't like the price tag, then we go post-emergent. And that's what I'm going to run through now.
Hey, Keith, what's that on the right? What type of weed is that?
I'm about to tell you, it's hen bit. Both of those are hen bit. The one on the right is when everybody wants to try and kill it. And you know what it's going to do to you? I don't care what you put on it. It's going to sit there and look at you and go. Now, this is what hen bit looks like round about the middle of November to Thanksgiving. You can spray it at that time, but nobody wants to get a sprayer out of the barn at Thanksgiving, do you? It's just not in your mind. And you remember I said something about it's out of mind, out of sight, or out of sight, out of mind when we started out? If you don't see it, oh, well, ain't nothing going on, I don't need it. Well, right then is when you need to spray this. We put out test plots on this stuff, sprayed them at Thanksgiving 4 years in a row. We killed 95% of the hen bit in those test plots, and in the test pastures we put it into, we killed 95% by spraying in the fall when that stuff is little.
What were you spraying?
Plain old 2,4-D, a quart to the acre, will cook it like you throwed a fish in hot grease. And it works, but you got to be timely. But again, if you start looking at maybe making multiple 2,4-D applications, you run up on that number where the pre-emerge starts to be attractive. Next slide. So, our big problem with killing particularly cool season weeds and warm season weeds is timing of application. I ride by in August and smell 2,4-D and look out in a pasture and I see pigweed that's up to darn near my waist, bent over and drooped, that's just going to drop seed anyway, and somebody's wasted a 2,4-D application trying to kill them in August when they already made seed. When we ought to be controlling that weed May, when they're nice and small, and we'll see some pictures of that. They get a little bit bigger, we can throw some dicamba in there with something like Weedmaster, but typically, folks, a quart per acre, if we get it in here for cool season weeds, November, mid to late November, that's a cheap application. A really cheap application if hen bit particularly is one of your problems. And again, a quart per acre will typically do the job very well, a couple of years, and you usually have that stuff knocked back out of it. It's a waste of time to spray hen bit horse nettle, chickweed, anything, once flower buds form on it. Because it'll pull whatever it's got in that plant out resource-wise, and it'll mature those seeds. Even if it's laying there looking like it's on its last little old thread, it's still going to make seed. Next slide. Listen, I see people spraying this one on the right all the time. Best thing you can do there is get a bush hog and go in there and knock them out and don't let them head out and grow. Now you've had 2 years to fool with this thing. You see it over there in the first year on the left. If you go in there and put a quart of 2,4-D on it in February typically, you can go in there and just wipe that stuff off the face of the earth. If it's a little bit bigger than an ashtray, big around, you can put some dicamba, 2,4-D dicamba product on it, a quart of that, and it'll do the same thing. And you don't have to go to more expensive chemistry. Again, it's the timing factor. Scout your pastures, look for this stuff, and when you see the problem, spray it. Get out of the rut of it ain't time to spray. Next slide.
I have a question actually. So, the way I go after thistle is by hand.
If you don't have a lot of them, that's an effective way to control
At
it.
this point I don't, but I just was wondering, I've always kind of been curious, so like I cut them off right at the base and flip them. But if they have a flower bud on them, I'm pretty sure unless I collect the flower bud, that in the heat it will mature.
It will.
Okay, I'm not crazy. All right.
No, you're
Just
not.
wanted to check.
Now, let me tell y'all something about thistle. If you got them in a fence row, put you on a pair of leather gloves, and they come up and they're headed out and they got that bud there. Get you a pair of good leather gloves on and just ease that bud open and look in there and see if you see any weevil larvae. Most of this stuff with thistle. Now, I was part Wayne Tankersley, who was agent in Morgan County, Peyton Sapp, who's now over here in Waynesboro, Burke County. We went and got weevils in Missouri and brought them back here and turned them out in 97, 98. And they are pretty much all over middle Georgia. I've checked thistles everywhere I've gone and I find them. So what I tell folks to do is go check. If you got them in a fence row and they're headed out, look to see if the weevils are in there or if they've already matured. You can open them up, and if you pull the fluff out and there ain't a seed on it, you had the weevil larva in there. I watched a 40-acre pasture in Putnam County that was full be completely driven out in 3 years by the weevils. And they're very effective in controlling them, but if you got a little in the pocket, I'd leave a little bit of weevil habitat there for them if you got them. And it's easy for you to determine it because you can open that bud up and see the worms in there. And if they're there, just close it back up. They're just happy as they can be. And you can check several flowers down through there. And if you got weevil larvae in them, I'd leave them and let them mature so we can keep that weevil out here working for us, because they'll also go and get on these old set-aside pieces of land and roadside ditches and stuff and kill those to keep those thistles from becoming a problem. So the earlier the better. January, early February. You know, how warm a year has it been? Weedmaster's a good option early, 3 to 4 inch diameter. When they're laying there on the ground, if they get a little bit bigger, you may want to add another pint to it. If you spray it necked up, you ain't going to accomplish a whole lot. And if you just have a few of them, get you a ditch shovel and you'll dig them up. Save you some money. Crabgrass. I mentioned what it'll do. That picture on the left, you see them little bow ties? You'll see that. I start scouting. Got one of my farm supply people, and I go by his office, and I finally taught him how to find crabgrass, because it's growing right there by where his farm shop's at. And last year, March the 3rd, That's what it looked like. We had about 3 days. We got temperatures up around 58 degrees right up on top of the soil, and that stuff popped out. And we had 2 freezes on it, and I think he had 100% survival rate on that stuff right there. And it's the same way in the pastures. So if we go out here and we try to put down a pre-emerge later in the year, and this stuff's already germinated, and if we have a warm winter, I have found seedling crabgrass on Valentine's Day. And people will go, oh, I'm gonna put my pre-emerge out today because it's the middle of February. Wrong. Next slide. Crabgrass, as I said, typically germinates fairly early. You know, pre-emerge done late, mid-March ain't gonna get you much. Get your pre-emerge application out, as we talked about, early. At least the 1st of January, and you'll be all right. Now, if you miss it, bunny ear phase is out there, that is the best time to kill it. Now, I know there's some folks still using that stuff that was pulled off the market that's got an M and ends in an A. Still using that for crabgrass control, and it works if you get it in that bunny ear stage. When that little old bitty thing's down there, that stuff that starts with an M and ends in an A will kill it. I didn't tell y'all to do it, but I'm just telling you what'll happen. Now, another good one out there is Pastora and 4 to 6 ounces of Roundup. And I said that one time to a group, and they're like, what in the world are you talking about? It's not on the label. It used to be. The 2 reps that I knew for DuPont that brought this stuff out told me don't even bother to use it unless you put some Roundup in it for a synergist. They worked with it for 10 years before they ever released it, and it makes a difference. And no, it's not going to kill you warm season grass, but it'll darn sure make a difference in the effectiveness of what this Pastora does. Now, if the crabgrass is really hardened off and started to sprawl, you can go out there with, rather than a 1 ounce application rate of Pastora, you can go to 1.5 ounces and put an 8 ounce shot of Roundup in there, and it'll cook it. But it will, the only thing about Pastora, and it's not the Roundup that does it, you can put Pastora by itself and it's going to stall your Bermuda grass out by about 2 to 3 weeks. Yes, ma'am.
So can you graze on top of that?
On Pastora, 7 days. But again, this is an expensive got ahead of me there. The Pastora application is expensive. Pastora is a fairly expensive product. So if you've got multiple annual weed problems out there, you can come in there with the pre-emerge and take care of most of this stuff, if not all of it. Next one. There we go. Rhizome Johnson grass and foxtail. Now this is the old way we used to kill this stuff.